I was Googling people and I was like, oh, I really want to talk to her. Found them like, they're dead. Another one, they've passed away. This one, not here anymore. And I'm like, holy cow, I better make this film. You know, I'm not getting any younger, and I want to do it before, while I still have the energy and while the major players are still alive.
This is Andrew Vance, and you're listening to Choose the Hard Way, where my guests share stories about how doing hard things builds stronger, more resilient humans. If you enjoy this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. That helps the show surface higher in search. It makes a huge difference, and it helps more people find the inspiring stories that my guests share. Please subscribe wherever you listen, and take a moment to share this episode with a friend. If you'd like to suggest a guest or say hello, you can reach me at choosethehardway@gmail.com or at hardwaypod on Twitter or Instagram. In 2022, the Women's Tour de France is back, and I could not be more excited. What most people don't know is that there was also a Women's Tour de France that ran from 1984 to 1989. Uphill Climb is a documentary film currently in production that will tell the story of the original Women's Tour de France and the legendary cyclists who competed in it. This episode is part of Life Cycles, a new series I've launched within Choose the Hard Way. Conversations in this series cover the topics you've come to expect from Choose the Hard Way, with guests whose lives and careers have been shaped by cycling, or whose lives and careers have shaped the world of cycling. My guests are the filmmakers behind Uphill Climb. Director Jill Yesko is a journalist, author, and fellow at the Center for Sports Communication and Media at the University of Texas. Jill represented the United States in cycling at the 1983 World University Games and competed in the Olympic trials. Jill's previous films include Tainted Blood, The Untold Story of the 1984 Olympic blood doping scandal, and Broken Trust, Athlete Abuse Exposed. She is the host of the podcast The Bounce, Sports Talk with the Spin, on WYPR and NPR. Uphill Climb's executive producer, who also joins us on this episode, is Allie Davis, a lifelong serious cyclist, an entrepreneur who started up 3 companies, and an award-winning veteran of television, sports production, global marketing and brand partnerships, athlete marketing, and brand development. Allie has held senior leadership roles at Fox Sports, NBC Universal Sports, and Red Bull. Go to uphillclimbfilm.com and at uphillclimb.film on Instagram to learn more and support the film. Jill, I just really want to know, like, what went down at the 1983 University Games and what bike were you riding?
What went down? So I didn't know what to expect at World University Games. They flew us to Edmonton, where we all met up. We did not get team bikes. It was a little bit bare bones. They did give us skin suits and Kappa outfits, but we thought it was going to be like, I don't know, like a low-key affair. And we get there, and it is like a mini Olympiad. It was huge. There were also, I have like old school Kodak pictures of teams from all over the world. Greg Louganis was there. And what I remember is they had an enormous opening ceremonies at the stadium. And we walked in our outfits, cheering, all of that. And Princess Diana and Prince Charles were there. So we walked right by them. And I was like, ooh, this is like kind of a big deal. What was I riding? I may have still had my Miata 912 that I bought in like 1980 or 81. Yeah, I had the Miata 912 because steel was real with my sew-up tires and my downshifters. Here's an interesting story. There was a Chinese team there. I guess China had just gotten into cycling, and they had like no idea. And I remember the Chinese girls, instead of cycling gloves, they had like white gloves, like Tea Party gloves on, They weren't quite sure how to use their shifters. I guess the Chinese threw a team together. I remember I didn't speak Mandarin or Cantonese, but just sort of pantomiming shift now, like trying to help them out. And they had these weird, I don't know, like maybe rock climbing helmets on. So that was kind of cool. And then the Russians were there. This is during, like the Reagan years. So it was really like hardcore Cold War. And they had the red jerseys with the CCCP on them. And we actually traded jerseys. I had one, no idea where it is. Feel really bad. That would have been like an awesome thing to have after all of these years. So, that Jeannie Longo was on the start line. It was like the one time I can say I was on the start line with her. There were a lot of good stories out of World University Games.
And people can say what they will about Russia, but that CCCP logo and kit, it was very striking. It was a very powerful visual design for anybody who remembers it. And Jill, that had to be, we're talking pre-index shifting. Index shifting, I think, landed in 87 or 88. So we're talking friction shifting, probably 6 gears in the back?
Yeah, I think I had 6 on. I would ride, 5 for criteriums. I mean, I think what people don't understand now is that, and this is one thing we talk about in the film, you had no gears. I mean, you look at the way the riding style has evolved with technology. We were standing up, rocking the bike side to side, because maybe the smallest you had was possibly a 39, 19 or 21. A knee ripper, You wonder why we were more muscular in those days. We had to be to, get up a hill with limited gear selection.
And Jill, where did you grow up and how did you get into cycling? Because it was a pretty esoteric sport in most places in the United States at that point in time.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate. I'm from the great state of New Jersey. I'm really proud of it. And New Jersey was a real hotbed of cycling. The Newark Velodrome in the early 1900s, drew hundreds of crowds. But there were some very long-running cycling teams there, in part because cycling was an immigrant activity. So you had the German Bicycle Club and Mike Frazee and his father, Vic Frazee, and even their grandfather. They were French, and they had Paris Sport not far from where I grew up. But I went to Rutgers University, and I remember in 1980 watching Eric Heiden on TV win those 5 speed skating medals. And I had a big crush on Eric Heiden. And then someone said, Eric is now a bike racer, and he's going to be at this race, the Tour of Somerville, which is the longest running bike race in the United States. And it's maybe 10, 15 miles from New Brunswick, where I was living. So I got on my Schwinn varsity, and I rode over to Somerville. I don't know how long it took. I'm at that, 50-pound bike. And I met Eric, and I was like, ooh, he's cute, big legs. And then Eric said, hey, are you going to be racing today? And I was really flattered that he even thought of that. I guess he didn't see the bike. And I'm like, no, I'm just here to watch. I watched the women's race, and I was like, man, I could do that. And I joined a bike club in Princeton, New Jersey, Cop Cycle, run by this crusty old 6-day racer named Fritz Kuhn, who took me under his wing, and as did all the old timers there. And I got that Miata 912 and started training. And the next year I was on the line at Tour of Somerville. So that was kind of how I got hooked.
And what did you get out of cycling? What did you enjoy about it?
I loved, pushing myself to the limit. Great opportunities to travel. All of the things that you really want out of a sport. Ability to compete and to have great teammates. I mean, World University Games was fantastic. And, even right now, the cycling's the gift that keeps giving. 40 plus years later, I'm still in contact with so many people, and to have the opportunity to make this documentary and the docs that I've made before that some involve cycling and others are sports oriented. I think cycling becomes it gets in your blood, whether or not you're still riding your bike or not.
It gets in your blood one way or another. And of course, that's
like a virus. You can't get rid of it. It's like herpes. You can't get rid of it.
It's one way to put it, Jill. Yes.
New Jersey, this is how we roll. Just say it like it is, Andrew.
I love it. So we're going to jump into the doc in a second. Before we get there, Allie, what was your entry point into cycling? What drew you to it, and why did you stick around?
So my first bike was actually a BMX bicycle, and I used to build jumps for myself and go play in the dirt. And I don't know why. I just wanted to do that and play and probably escape a little bit. And then I remember I think, Jill, you're the 10-speed varsity, the Schwinn varsity. All of a sudden I had a flash in my head. I think I had the silver version of that. And I used to put my cat on it and put my cat on my bike. I think I was going in a different direction with my cycling back then. And then it wasn't until high school that really my senior year, one of my best friends and I grew up in Marin County, in Mill Valley, very lucky. And my girlfriend and I wanted to ride over Mount Tam on our road bikes. And we trained and we trained and we trained. And we woke up one morning at 4 a.m. and it was freezing cold and foggy. And we said, nope. And never did it. And then it was later in life when I met a boyfriend, and he happened to be a triathlete, and I picked it up again and really fell in love with it at that time. Then it stuck. The road and I are married.
Let's jump into the project that you all are working on. So how did you arrive at this project? Of all the stories that you could potentially tell at this moment in time, why this one? Why is this the moment in time? Why is this the project?
I'm going to start first. So I had made two other documentaries. The first one is Tainted Blood. The first two were more expository. My background is journalism. So I'm obviously very interested in telling a good story, particularly one that hasn't really gotten the attention that it merits. So Tainted Blood was a hard movie to make because it was about unknown dope, really very a doping scandal that did not get a lot of attention for a lot of reasons, and it happened at the '84 Olympics. And a lot of people saw the film. I got a lot of support. I got a lot of pushback. And so that was my first experience with a topic where I was like, oh, I thought everyone's going to be really happy about this film, and they weren't. And then the second film was difficult in a different way. It was more emotionally difficult. It's called Broken Trust. And I interviewed female and male athletes who have either directly been sexually abused or have otherwise been affected by sexual or emotional abuse, but how they've come out on the other side of it. And I made it for an educational market, not to be a downer, but to show that we can work through this and there are solutions. So after making that film, which was quite an intense process, listening to so many stories and, as they say, witnessing, having to kind of hold in my own emotions while interviewing people, I really wanted to do a story that was much more heartfelt, that I thought would be more of, as I still build this documentary, a love letter to the women who rode the Tour de France Feminine, which is something I tried to follow as much as possible in the 80s via Velo News, which was just black and white newsprint. You had to really hold your breath and wait for that to come every month, or hear stuff through the grapevine, or whatever you could pick up via Winning or La Gazzetta dello Sport at the specialized newsstand. And having come into contact with so many of these other women through my first project, Tainted Blood, and with the advent of social media where you can find people, I was like, well, this is an amazing project that's going to be so pleasurable to do and really honor the women of the 80s. And so that was the real genesis of the project that I started kind of right before COVID, which brought it to a crashing halt, like so many other things in our lives. And now we've picked it back up again.
And when the women's Tour de France was happening from 84 to 89. What was the status of the sport? And we were kind of talking about this before we jumped into the actual interview, but I was pretty young during the 1984 Olympics, but that was a really big moment in time for sport generally in the United States, but definitely for cycling. American cyclists grabbed some gold medals. But what was happening on the women's side of the sport? And the men's side also was just kind of becoming fully professionalized at that point in time. What was the status? How were the teams organized? How was the competition set up for the women's Tour de France?
Well, just in general, the 80s were really, I considered a golden era for American cycling. I mean, you could pretty much find a race every weekend, whether it's a road race or a track series or a criterium. I mean, mountain biking was still very, very fringe at that point. It didn't, really kind of come along till the later 80s. By the way, I think my first mountain bike was a Fisher Hukuiku. It was a great bike. Man, those first mountain bikes were sick. They just digress. It's no wonder I have back problems now, Allie. It's like your body was the shock absorber. Those bikes were really hard. And our steel bikes, too. I'm short, and I was riding like a 49-centimeter frame with like no rake. It was practically like a track bike with road gears. So your body was beaten up on those things. Anyway, the 80s were a good time. I was living and racing in LA during the 84 Olympics. And I think one can't discount the amount of hype when Olympics come to a city. And if you watch my film, Tainted Blood, The Untold Story, the 1984 Olympic blood doping scandal on Amazon, one of the things that I think really set up the blood doping scandal was how much hype was going on. As I mentioned, height of the Cold War, it was a legacy Olympics for LA. Reagan was in the White House. It was a very jingoistic time. And so it was going to be the USA versus Russia, no matter what. And then, of course, the Russians boycotted, sort of at the last minute. And the expectation then was, well, with the Russians gone, the U.S. is just going to win everything. So the pressure on all the athletes, especially the cyclists, was enormous. And so I think and it was the first women's road race in 84. And of course, we got gold and silver in that. And I think that really kind of catapulted cycling into everybody's consciousness because, NBC covered it. Alexei Grewal was the very unexpected winner of the men's road race. The track racing didn't get quite as much attention if you weren't like a trackie, but they won tremendous, huge gold medal haul for them too. But I remember with my boyfriend at the time, we knew Steve Bauer. He's this big, beefy Canadian sprinter. I'm like, oh, he's going to kick Alexei's ass. And Alexei just slingshotted around him. We couldn't believe it. We were like jumping up and down in our apartment, like hugging each other, high-fiving. It was an amazing moment.
My listeners will know that I recently did an episode about a cycling TV pilot. I tried to get off the ground with a producer friend of mine, Eric Matthews, in 2004, just about all of the different cycling subcultures in LA at that moment in time. It was incredible, and I feel really lucky that I got to be part of it. But 20 years earlier, it sounds like LA was really cracking. So I'm just curious, what was the scene like at that moment in time? And particularly from a group ride point of view, were there like the See Me ride, the Montrose ride, Rose Bowl, was stuff like that happening, or what was going on?
Totally. So we used to do there were the Griffith Park rides. I think that was Wednesday night. I think that was 3 groups. Rose Bowl. I remember when I first moved out there, I thought I was in really good shape. I did the Rose Bowl ride, and I just kept getting dropped. And I was like, what is the matter with me? It was so fast. And then by year 2, I'm like, this isn't that hard. I can totally do this. There were the PCH rides. Even earlier, I think I have relatives in LA. I went out in 81, 82. I think there was an Ernie's group ride. I didn't do South Bay. I did the track series at Encino when the Olympic Velodrome even before it opened, they did a lot of test meets. So that one doesn't exist anymore. That was out at Dominguez. Raced at San Diego Velodrome. Did a lot of road rides, a lot of little crits there too. I wasn't the best road rider. I was really working more on my track and sprinting skills at the time. But yeah, I remember when I first moved out there, I was like, man, everybody is so fast out here. And it was because you could train year round. You know, on the East Coast, I remember back in the early 80s, I mean, you didn't have, you were pretty limited. You know, I had you could have like a Tenturi trainer. You could have this really old school, I had rollers too, which really helped with my track riding. But indoor trainers were very primitive, and they would totally ruin your back tire. And, didn't have headphones. You had to put music on your boombox. So training inside was just a real pain in the ass.
So going back to that moment in time, the women's Tour de France in '84, were they competing as national teams or trade teams, or how was it organized?
They were national teams. The very first '84 team, again, because it was actually really overshadowed by the fact that that you couldn't ride the Tour de France and ride the Olympic road race. The schedules were not going to allow that. So there is, some people throw shade at the women who rode in '84. They're like, oh, that's just because you couldn't make the Olympic team, or you weren't selected for the Olympic team, which is really a crock. Marianne Martin won the '84 team. It was rather ad hoc. It got better as the tour continued. It was 1989 was the last edition of the tour, but these were composite national teams that rode from '84 to '89.
But when was the moment that you knew you were all in and this is the story that you were going to tell next?
I think just when I started talking to women, this is odd reason, but when I was researching who was available for interviews, I was Googling people and I was like, oh, I really want to talk to her. Found them they're dead. Another one, they've passed away. This one, not here anymore. And I'm like, holy cow, I better make this film. You know, I'm not getting any younger, and I want to do it before, while I still have the energy and while the major players are still alive. I mean, there's certainly an urgency to this. And as Ali will attest, one of the most important people in the film is Felix Levitin, who was the head of Amory Sports Organization, which controls the Tour de France. And it was his idea to start a women's tour. Felix Levitin is no longer with us, but we have identified somebody who was one of Felix's colleagues at the time with ASO, and he's French, and he has agreed to speak with us. So he obviously was not as old as Felix, but there is the clock is ticking for making this film.
And when you started to dig into the story and do these interviews, was this pre-work? Was this just kind of exploring the territory, doing informational interviews and kind of sketching out how you were going to approach the project, or what is your process like?
Exploring the viability of doing it. Like I said, who is available? What is my idea for making the film? And that has certainly evolved since Ali joined me about 2 months ago as executive producer. My original idea was rather modest. It's I just want to make something that celebrates these women, and whether it's a full-length doc or a short, and whether I put it just out on YouTube, I want it to be out there. And now that I see the potential to make this a much more robust film that tells a more encompassing story, that Ali has helped me, expand the scope of this. I think the film is going to be a much more rewarding experience for all viewers.
How did you meet? How did you come to be collaborators on this project?
Ali stalked me. Let's just put that out there. Ali. Kind of.
it was magical stalking. It was accidental stalking. I was thinking about what I was going to do next, and my background is media and sports marketing, and having been an athlete myself, I've always wanted to see more women represented on television, because as I'm listening to Jill tell the stories from the 80s, I'm thinking, yeah, and it was all mostly men that I had on cycling as my role models, so to speak, because that's who I really saw most of all. So as I was talking with my husband one day, and I said, I think I've got a really good documentary inside me. I just don't know the topic yet. And I happened to look at a newsletter and read about this woman, Jill Yesko, who just started a sports podcast on an NPR station about more eclectic women in sport. And I thought, well, with my background and the people I know, I have a few women that I think Jill might want to be, know about and maybe have on her show. So I went to LinkedIn and I just sent her an invitation, and she wrote me right back and with a note that said, I'd love to learn more about you and tell you about this documentary I'm working on the Women's Tour de France. So I almost fell out of my chair. And one thing led to another. We had a couple of video calls, and she asked if I'd executive produce the film. And I didn't even think twice. I just said yes. I understood the importance of what's happening right now in women in sport, coverage that we're starting to get, and the role that this film is going to play as part of the engine that's going to get more people invested and want to watch the live racing and understand it. But we have to understand where it came from and who these women are that paved the way for what's happening today.
And it sounds like you both had to take some chances in kind of this dance that led to the relationship that you now have as collaborators, as is often the case, right? And that's part of what I like to unpack on Choose the Hard Way is, where does our intuition take us, or how do we end up at these crux moments? How do we make these decisions? And a decision like this to collaborate on a project of this magnitude and this importance is a significant moment, right? So I'd just be curious, Jill, when you got that LinkedIn invitation and you started to have this dialogue, as you indicated, 2 months later, you've expanded the scope, it sounds like, of the project. You were thinking about pushing into different dimensions with the story you're going to tell. What was your feeling at the outset, and how did you both identify in each other, like, yes, this is someone I want to collaborate with on this project?
Well, I was running into some significant roadblocks with first of all, throughout this, I was like, man, this is like trying to lift such a heavy weight. I can't quite get this. If I lift this over my head, it's going to crash. I knew I needed a collaborator, and I was at a point in the project where I was at a little bit of a lull. Because this is called the hard way, I'll just tell you. I had experienced the hard way with tainted blood in dealing with the United States Olympic Committee and the International Olympic Committee. It was like a real David versus Goliath. They have what I need for the project, which is access to footage, which is expensive and complicated, and they do not make that easy. And so with the Tour de France, I was running into all kinds of roadblocks with that. And so I was almost ready to put the project down for a while and just say, let me take the summer off and kind of figure out what's going to happen. And then Allie sent me the note, and I saw in Allie, I'm like, okay, this is a partner. This is somebody who is new to the project. It's a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and it's going to help relight the fire under my butt to get this project going. And I think, Allie, we've been pretty good with, at this point, since we're still in production, there are a lot of crossover duties, but, I'm, the way I say, I'm a little bit more, I wanted, like I said to Allie, I want to concentrate on what, I think I do best, which is the actual production. You are the high level marketing partnership, get her done. But right now we've both been like kind of sharing duties. There's just Man, every day there are 10 more emails to address. They're like weeds. You answer one and 10 more pop up. And part of that is the nature of the topic here that we're dealing with. It's an international production, which brings all of its own problem sets to deal with.
Allie, how about you?
I feel like I've known Jill for probably 10 years, and that's a positive when I say that. Because it was a really easy relationship that started, and we spoke similar languages, and it was so great to get back into my production shoes that I've missed on a level like this. And I just, it's so easy because it's so necessary and it has to happen. And when you think about choosing the hard way, I realize it's when you think about intuition, I've been fortunate to follow my gut throughout most of my career. And when I haven't, I made a couple of errors, but I always learn from those. And I'm not a typical corporate person. Even back in the day when I worked for a very corporate ad agency, I would not wear pantyhose. I couldn't do it. It just was not going to happen. And this was an opportunity to really help tell a story that is kind of like in my soul and my gut. I did not become a professional athlete. And I remember the day I was on my bike riding home when I came to that realization, like I had a decision to make. Do I want to be married to my saddle or do I want to go and start a career? And I listened to my gut and I said, you got to go start your career. Like I just, and I didn't really have a funnel to put me in through any kind of training program. I was doing it all on my own. And I moved to LA kind of overnight. Again, just intuition. I didn't want to, but I just knew that that's what I had to do. And that was hard. I mean, I had anxiety attacks. So it was terrible. But I worked through it all. And again, just always continued to follow my passion and follow my gut. And I met incredible people along the way that have always been really supportive and amazing. That really led me to this place. So on one hand, it was magical that Jill and I met at this moment in time. But on the other hand, it seems like this road completely led me to her. I mean, if you look at my resume, it's just, it's kind of like, it's like one pedal in front of the other. And off we go. And here we are.
If we look at competitive cycling and at the professional level, some of the most interesting racing that's happening is in the women's fields, right? Like particularly, I think about the past several cyclocross seasons where you basically have Matthew Van Der Poel and Wout van Aert time trialing away from the field, which is not particularly compelling. I love watching bike racing. I watched all of the women's cyclocross races for as long as I've been watching cyclocross. On the world tour level, and like particularly with Grand Tours, there just hasn't been that opportunity because, with the Tour de France, for example, it's back this year. Tour de France Feminine is back. But we have this gigantic gap between 89 and today. And I guess I would be curious, why do you think we've had this massive gap? Why has this been ignored, much to the detriment of all of sport, I think?
I mean, it's a complex question, Andrew, and there's many, no pun intended, components to it. What I will say in general, women in sport as an umbrella just hasn't had the equal playing field on the field or quite frankly off the field. I mean, most of my career has been in sport, and I mean, there are countless tables I've sat at where I'm the only female at the table. And it's been great, but it's also a little disheartening, and that hasn't changed a whole lot yet. The other part of it is that it's an ecosystem that feeds itself. And so until there are the athletes there are the events there are the sponsors there is the production coverage, there's the money to support it. And if you look at some of the areas that women in sport have excelled at, they've started a long time ago, like tennis and golf, where there have been the coverage. So think about if women's cycling had had this coverage for the last 20 years, where would it be today? We're just getting started. And so we're getting started because there's finally the voice out there that's saying it's time. And it's what I'm hearing and what you said is on so many conversations I'm having with men in particular about women's professional racing, they're saying it's more exciting than the men's. And I don't mean that to discount the men's racing. They're phenomenal athletes and incredible. But not only is it more exciting, but also the women tend to be a little bit more interesting when you talk to them and hear their stories. I was having a conversation recently with another friend in the industry, and we were talking about what it means to be a professional athlete. For men, that means you don't have it. That's your job. You don't have any other jobs, typically. For women, we still have another job. We might have two jobs. And so it creates a little bit more of a story, if you will, behind what makes the athlete. And then you add on to that, if that female decides to have a baby at that certain point, you've got these elite athletes who have to make a decision where they are arguably at the height of their physical capability is at the height of their childbearing years. And so they're also forced to make a decision. And what I'm starting to see, and I'm so happy to see it, is some of the teams and the sports are making a path back after babies so that they can welcome women back, help them get back to where they want to be and part of the team, if you will. So it's an ecosystem that has to be fed and at all levels. And if the events aren't there, you're not going to have the athletes who are excited about competition. And that's all women want to do. We just want to race. We're competitive. We just want to win, be teammates, have a good time, push our bodies, see what we can do, see what's possible. It's no different.
Jill, do you have anything to add to that? Do you have any thoughts?
I absolutely agree with what Ali has said. I often think, what if that momentum that we had in the 80s had stayed? I'm still not really sure why cycling shriveled up and died in the U.S. in the 90s. I mean, Lance brought attention, but I got out of the sport. I wasn't really paying attention in the 90s. I went on to grad school and other things. And I sort of like to say my knowledge of cycling kind of stopped in 1989. But recently, I've been contacted by some of the promoters, male promoters, who put on some enormous series. Like there was the Tour of Texas. That was for men and for women, and that was like the thing to go to for a number of years. That was huge, and you had racers from Europe coming over because we had money here for that, and they would ride Tour of Texas. We had Course Classic for the women. We had the Ore-Ida stage race, which so many women point to as being the hardest stage race. I remember, so many long-standing crit series here on the East Coast, like National Capital Open around the Ellipse in D.C., Salem Witches Cup up in Massachusetts, the Apple Lap in New York. I mean, these great training races in Central Park and Brooklyn. And then I don't know, it just wasn't there anymore. So we are definitely due for a cycling renaissance, and whether that takes the form of gravel racing, probably not track racing. That's not coming back in the U.S. I mean, I don't know. I think part of it too, Ali, I think it's the liability. I mean, it's just the just sort of, as you say, sort of the unsexy part of it, the race organizing and all of the road closures and whatever. Like maybe that has gotten harder. It's just not economically feasible to put these races on anymore. And certainly, if you don't have the audience, the race isn't going to happen. You're not going to recoup your expenses.
And I don't think people understand the expense of the multi-stage out in the hinterlands production coverage and what that actually entails to put on an event like the Tour de France, where you've got helicopters and, it's a traveling circus. And there's a whole media center that packs up as soon as the event's over and gets to the next stop and sets it up for the next day. I mean, it's that there's a story there that people don't understand what happens. But I think the other component to it is that people don't understand it. And so it harkens back for me with rugby in the US when I was working on the World Rugby Cup. Here in the US, people didn't understand rugby for years. And part of our job on the network side was to help people understand it. And we ended up doing something that was really fun on the second round that we had of the World Cup. It happened to be in the UK, and we used Monty Python type of animation to help people understand the event. And I mean, it was a combination of things, but people started to really understand rugby, and we grew 400% from the first rugby in the US, which was incredible, became a viable sport because people started to really get it and understand it. And then they started to say, oh my God, it makes American football super slow. And they really enjoyed it. So I think there's also that component to it. And you look at Formula One and what's happening right now with Drive to Survive. I'm pointing to that a lot these days because it's a really easy example that for the first time, it's making Formula One make sense to the American audience. And the Miami event was massive, both from a event on site and a viewership. It was incredible. So and that's where I feel like this story that Jill and I are telling is going to help cycling audiences just understand more about bike racing and the athletes and what it really takes and get them a little more invested in it.
So I'm curious, as you've moved forward with the project, where are you at right now? And what are some of the opportunities and challenges in front of you? Because I know you're very much in the midst of it, and everyone consumes tons of streaming content and watches documentaries. I think very few people understand just how incredibly complex it is to bring one of these projects to life. So could you just speak a bit about what's going into actually making the thing itself?
Jill, you want to start?
I don't even know where to start.
First of all, Andrew, thank you for recognizing all of that.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah, it doesn't just happen. Hey kids, let's make a documentary, and then bam, it's on all the streaming networks. So I would say with this, I'm going to just start with COVID because let's blame everything on COVID, but it did delay the project. When I initially wanted this to come out, pardon me, in time for the debut of the Tour de Femme, which is the most recent version of the Tour de France. Okay, well, that's not going to happen. The big challenges are because this isn't just about the Americans who rode the Tour de France Féminine. It's been lining up interviews with the European riders, finding them, getting them to agree, hiring crews, scheduling. It's been a huge issue. Where Allie and I will be in France for 2 weeks in July and interviewing people and capturing footage. And we are very excited about that and still working out a myriad of logistical details surrounding that. We're hoping to wrap up all of our filming by the fall and then go into post-production and edit in LA because Allie and I are on opposite coasts and we need to be together for this process. I'm going to let Allie address some of the other issues surrounding funding and haggling over permissions and our legal stuff, which is so unsexy but completely necessary to dot all the I's and cross all your T's if you want to get distribution. Throwing it to Allie.
Yeah, it's a lot of parallel paths that have to happen at the same time, just paving the way. I mean, I feel like we're pioneering in a certain level because you've got two women filmmakers making a film about women in sport. And the conversations are really interesting that we're having all around. There's a lot of excitement and support around it, but we do need funding for it to make it happen. We're talking with brands that have skin in the game, that have been supporting not just cycling, but women in cycling, because this is, again, knowing what I know about becoming a sponsor of an event, especially a big world event, you don't get a whole lot with it. You get your name on a banner and, I'm being a little, vague about it, but you don't get a lot for your money. And so this film and content pieces like this are ways that these brands really do get a bigger return on their investment, because I believe that they're investing in this for a long-term reason. It's not a short-term payoff. And they believe that this is just the beginning of growing something. And so the coming together of both bringing those brands together. And again, remember, I just started 2 months ago, so it's a lot of fast conversations that have been happening to tie it all together, and then having the conversations about distribution and looking at who's the right distribution partner. This is not something that I just want to sit on one of the big streaming platforms necessarily immediately, because will they be a partner to help get the word out about this? I want to look at those streaming and the broadcast partners that also have skin in the game, because this film will help them bring the viewers to their live events. And we are also, what you get with this film is marketing. So we ourselves will be promoting and pushing it out there in a way that I haven't really seen done before with a film from the filmmaker's point of view. I mean, our experience is kind of fun, and people are, how many people, Jill, have we had say, can I PA for you? Can I come on? I want to be part of this. People want to help and they want to be part of it. So it's been an incredible experience so far. But there are daily hurdles that just have to be addressed. And it's really, I do see every challenge as an opportunity to get creative and think about how can we approach this? What can we do? Who can we bring in? Who do we know? Who can help pave the way, or do we have to pivot? And I don't see anything so far that's getting in the way where we're not going to be able to tell the story we want to tell in the way it needs to be told.
There are still so few women filmmakers who do sports films. To say it's a really small sorority. So I'm so delighted. Like Allie and I are pioneers with this. I don't know any two women who have made a sports doc, right? It's still small, and this is something that needs to change.
Allie and Jill, on this project, have you had any moments so far where you feel like I'm having to flex into new areas, do something new or slightly different, and that's uncomfortable to do?
Yeah, for sure. Every day.
Really, daily, I would say, right, Allie?
Yeah, everything from, I've been sports marketing, so I've had access and touch points and been sitting in rooms when programming and production meetings happen. And I've been part of productions in the past, but the focus of my career has been on the marketing side of things, legal. So now, with Jill having to be the decision makers about the big legal issues, about the distribution, about who the programming partners are, about the content, about the story, about the brands. That's probably the most familiar part for me. It's, feel very fortunate that we have an incredible network of people to go to, from a lot of mentorship. And in the moments of fear and doubt are moments where I try to ground myself in a certain way. I do try to go out on my bike and exercise, making sure that that's happening, meditate as often as I can when I remember to, but I get locked and loaded on this. I wake up early and, Jill's 3 hours ahead of me, and I am so fired up about this that I will start with my first cup of coffee it could be 6 a.m, and all of a sudden it's 6 p.m, and it's so amazing what all has happened in the day. And then I wonder why I'm so tired on the weekend. But it's nothing but joy. So even in those moments of anxiety, I think about the importance of the story, and that itself just grounds me. It's like, it has to be told. It's, it has to get done. There's even in our trailer, there's a moment where I think it's Nan who says, this has to be completed. And that's how I feel. And it will. and it will come out in the spring of next year to coincide with the cycling season, and it's going to be amazing.
I'm sorry I keep calling you at 6 o'clock in the morning, your time, Allie, but it's already 9 a.m. for me, and I've been up since 6 doing all of this. And it's like, and Allie's always like, I'm just having coffee. Can I pee? I promise to call you right back. It's also like just mundane stuff, but like trying to schedule calls with Allie in LA, me in Maryland here, and then Europe. Right. We were on a call the other day. I'm like, oh, I'm very grateful we don't have somebody in like Singapore or Hong Kong, because that means somebody's going to have to get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning for this call. But we had a funny thing happen yesterday. You know, like I think even our mentors are learning and stretching, because we have an amazing group of attorneys who have come on to do some pro bono work with us. And I was hoping that they would take on our editors and omissions insurance, which is, again, another very unsexy but very necessary and complicated thing, which means a lawyer has to sign off to make sure that everything has the correct set of permissions, right? And they said, yeah, this is something that we usually outsource, but we can try to do it ourselves. I'm like, oh, okay, you're going to be on a learning curve with this as well. Thank you. So even having our mentors do some additional stretching too has all been part of it. And I don't know, we can give you a million more concrete examples that, but I mean, maybe it's like Allie and I are kind of like, we're building this amazing race car and it will go.
If people want to learn more about the project, where should they go to learn more information and follow the project? uphillclimbfilm.com. uphillclimbfilm.com. That link will be in the show notes. So Jill, Allie, thanks so much for joining me here today. I'm really looking forward to seeing the film.
Thanks so much, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
If you have questions, comments, feedback, or want to suggest a guest, please reach out to @HardwayPod on social or email me at choosethehardway@gmail.com. Please take a moment to hit 5 stars in Spotify or iTunes and leave a 1-word review. That helps more people connect with the powerful stories my guests share, and I really appreciate the support. You are what you overcome. Choose the hard way.